Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the No Name podcast that explores people passions and, more importantly, how people get into these passions. And my name is Marina, and I'm joining with the guest named Patricio today. And this is actually the person that helped me open my creativity and try my hands at social media and content creation, as well as the brand management, the way how I felt was creative for me and for the brand itself as well. Patricio is a percussionist. I hope I'm pronouncing this right.
Yeah, that's right.
And also the leader of the Argentinian band based in Toronto and Mississauga, El Ceibo. And I'll also attach all the social media to this podcast for you to see what they're doing and also check out their upcoming shows because there's going to be a lot going on in the future. And thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a pleasure to work with you in the past and also have you as one of my first actual guests on this podcast.
Great. Well, pleasure was all mine. Not just to be here, but also to have had the chance to work with you last year was really great. Even to this day, the other day I was reworking some of the social media stuff and I used some of the templates that you left and it's like, oh, this is so great. I have the fonts, the colors, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
Thank you so much. And I think I just want to say some good words before we kind of start the whole episode. I just want to say that I think the experience of working with you was very important for me personally because first of all, I wanted to kind of be closer to this creative industry in general, especially music related, because it was always interesting for me, but not in the way that I wanted to be a musician myself, but rather from the perspective that I wanted to know how people are even doing all this, like how people are getting into being musicians and like playing instruments.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, like, there's so many different players and aspects in any of the creative scenes, in any of the disciplines. Like, you know, when you think, for instance, in music, which is the field that I'm familiar with, you think of festival programmers and directors and producers and like, you know, all of these people that are not probably necessarily musicians per se or that are necessarily interested in being the executors of the music per se, but instead, you know, they want to be involved in that process and in that scene. So it's really important still to have all of those players to have that same kind of passion for creativity themselves with their own practice and for the other practices too, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I even think that like all these people, the managers and others, they're also creators. And I think my perspective is that everyone is actually a creator. Even if you're in the management business or anything else, finance, medicine, you're still a creator. And it's important like to find it your way, your authentic way to express this creativity in the industry that you are involved in. But the problem now, I think that I am like coming across myself as a like young student that is trying to find my own passion, and I know like other people around me are kind of struggling with the same, is trying to figure out what we like and what we would like to see for our career, and not just the career but also our hobbies. And that's why like having a chat with people who have found this passion, like their passion, is very important for me to kind of understand what the action plan would look like to find it. And I know there might be no action plan for it, and like, or it might be very different like for everyone depending on how this person is. But I'm still trying. I think my way of thinking is just observing everything around me, and then based on what I have observed, I can try different hypotheses, and then after experimenting, I can find what I like. But so far, it's very difficult. It's been very difficult.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, you said it already, like, I don't think there's necessarily a perfect recipe, and we're all different. We all have different upbringings in different contexts in which we live in, and you know, it would be almost silly to say or pretend that there's one perfect way of doing things. But the fact that you're actively thinking about it and that you're trying, it's already a lot, I think, personally. And I think it's difficult for everyone. I don't know if that offers some sort of comfort I know it does to me to feel accompanied in the process of not really knowing what I'm doing sometimes.
And that's why actually I really want to hear your perspective today. Not even your perspective, but your story with your perspective, like how it happened for you and what you were feeling like throughout this whole way up until the point where you're at right now. And the first kind of question that I think will start off like this whole conversation and probably your story is, when and how did you feel like playing and like being a percussionist is something you would like to do, and like you're enjoying this right now? Because this is also very specific.
Yeah, it is very specific. So, and I have a very specific story for that, actually. So I was in high school. I was 16 years old. And I wanted to be in a band with my friends from high school. And I realized that there were no drummers in our class. So I thought, okay, the easiest way to join a band is if I play an instrument that is not, there. But that was initially, the sparkle. I knew I wanted to be a part of a band. I started to be interested in music, specifically, listening to different kinds of music, and at that time specifically a lot of 60s and 70s rock. And yeah, I kind of wanted to be a part of that, and specifically to do it with friends from high school. So that's specifically how I started to play the drums. And back then was strictly a hobby. I would still spend some time practicing, and I was somewhat dedicated to, getting a little bit good at it, and so I could actually play some music with my friends. And throughout that journey, also a few other interests in music came up. I remember my uncle gave me a couple of albums, jazz albums. And up until that moment, I was listening to rock that has a very specific approach to music and composition and performance. And jazz is like, I don't know if the opposite, but it's, if you've never been exposed to it and you come from rock, it's completely different. And I still remember to this day, he told me like everything you're listening is improvised. I was so blown away. I was completely amazed by it. And I just wanted to learn more about that, understand how are they doing this? How are they telling a story through this melody here? How, like, even the drumming is like the opposite. Rock is like super heavy on the bottom end, a lot of kick drum, snares, super, loud. Here's more like cymbals. It's very light. It's very gentle. Yet it had a lot of power to it. So I really wanted to understand more. I wanted to be able to play that on the drums and also understand what's the theory behind it. How are they able to communicate through music? So that also started a bit of a journey of trying to understand music as a language, so specifically the theory behind it and learning how to read. And that was more like self-taught as opposed to with the drumming that I started taking some private lessons at a music store. And yeah, that journey was like I just bought like a few books at the park and started kind of trying to understand that and try to learn from those books. And actually the first instrument that I ever picked up was an old guitar from my great grandpa or something like that. Also self-taught with guitar tabs. I didn't get very far. But that was actually kind of like also my gateway into music and learning music theory and teaching myself how to learn a bit of the theory behind the music. That kind of was the Kickstarter of everything. Because after high school, I started studying music professionally.
But just coming back to that time when you thought that you would like to start a band with your friends, do you remember where this thought even came from? Like, were you surrounded by people who were doing music and you were just fascinated by it? Or like what?
There was a bit of everything. I had a few friends from my class that were playing music. One of them was playing piano, but pretty talented. Like, he was playing also all other kinds of instruments. I went to see his kind of end of term showcase, from his private lesson teacher studio. And he played the drum set, he played the bass, he played the piano. I was like, whoa, I was so blown away. And he was a very good friend of mine back then. So I was, really looking up to him. And another friend, classmate, really great guitar player. So I was also like really amazed by what they could achieve. And specifically coming from, I started listening to the music first, and then seeing that my friends were able to do some of what I was listening and admiring from those albums was incredible to me. So to me, it was partly a social thing. I just wanted to kind of, connect with those friends. And also, like, I wanted to feel a part of, I was listening to these records, and I'm like, this is incredibly cool. Thinking, oh, I could do that. That'd be amazing. I think those two things were pretty big. And socially speaking, yeah, a way of connecting with other people and other friends from my class.
And would you say, like, what would you say music is, like, in general felt for you? Like what was it for you? Like, was it like a way to escape the reality, or like express yourself, or how did that feel?
So at first I would spend a lot of time just listening to music before I actually started practicing the craft itself. And I remember a couple of different things. And I think one of the bigger things was my friend from this class showing me this band. He gave me a CD. Oh my gosh, just dated myself. And Led Zeppelin specifically, and I listened to it, and I was blown away. And that kind of started the journey. And I remember spending, my afternoons after school, and getting home after class, and just laying down on the floor with my headphones on, putting the CD on, and I would just listen to the whole record. And that would be just like, an hour of my afternoon just listening to music. Would listen on repeat some of those albums, or like day after day the same album, and focus on different things, like, the drumming or the guitar solo, or, different things, the sounds. And that kind of also opened up the whole spectrum of music that was out there. And I started, exploring and trying to find other bands that would do something similar, but also a little bit different. And I also listened to some of the music that my older brother had. So he had some old Queen albums. So I started listening to that too. So for me, it kind of started, that's what it meant. It was like a hobby. I really enjoyed just, closing my eyes to listening to the music and finding new bands, and, getting that kind of sense of awe that of, the first time that you listen to a song. How every time you find something a little different. I would spend some time researching about the history behind the lyrics. So yeah, I guess like, a few different angles to it.
That's interesting. And I feel like there's a lot of sense of curiosity in the way how you found your way in music in general. Like curiosity and openness, to see the meaning like behind things and how it works. And it's probably like very often a driving force for people like to get into things because they're just interested in how they work and they want to try to create it as well.
100%. And I think, and this is my personal opinion and not necessarily backed by any kind of research, but I do believe that it is part of human nature. The storytelling is part of human nature, and creativity is too. And I think we all have it to different extents, and we all entertain it to different extents. And music is one of the ways of storytelling, I think. And that's one of the things that I was just remembering, when my uncle exposed me to this jazz album. One of the things that I remember very clearly to this day is I could feel a story behind that solo that the saxophonist was improvising. I could, almost kind of see the shapes as I was listening to it before even understanding, what that note meant over that chord, or, like how he's accenting it or whatever. So to me, that's really big, and it really resonates, with kind of just being human in a way. This is more like in retrospect. I guess I spent some time thinking about it too. And the creativity, like we all have and find different outlets. And I think, eventually that kind of storytelling that resonated inside me when I started practicing music more professionally, then it became a way for me to, as an outlet for my creativity, and also as a way of, translating emotions into sounds and vice versa. Like putting a guitar against your body, and like when you play, you feel, the resonance in your chest, and then what does that make you feel? And then you close your eyes and you see colors. What does this chord, look like in a color? Or, so like it starts to become like a whole different experience. And I do believe it kind of expands the way you can appreciate the world, right? Because suddenly you add sound to your experience as a person, in the world. It's not just words. It's you add the shape of sound to it too, and how you can relate to a color or an emotion through sound, or through a melody, or through a chord progression, or through a groove on the drums. But for me, that started afterwards, a couple of years later.
Wow. I actually really like the idea when you said about like the storytelling, is that and also that every creativity and expression of every idea is the storytelling in a way. It's just telling the story that you feel you want to share. But for you, like, and then I thought of the question, do you feel like the story that you were trying to tell with creating the music and then like making this music happen, was it always the same, or it was like changing over time? What is the story that you were trying to tell at that time and what you're trying to tell now?
To my knowledge, I don't think there's per se a specific story that I'm trying to tell. But, each musician will have their own unique way of expressing themselves through their music. And that on its own is a story. That's kind of what I was trying to express. Some people are, like improvising. Some people write songs. Some people compose for orchestras. And, when you appreciate a piece of art from those people, you're appreciating, in a way, part of their experience through that. And you won't get that exact same sound or that exact same combination of chords and lyrics, or that orchestration that you're getting from that person in anybody else. And that on its own, I think that is kind of the story, I think.
Because I think, like, for me, probably because I have quite a like rational mind that is trying to reflect on everything, trying to understand everything. I think I immediately, like, when I'm thinking of the storytelling, I'm immediately thinking of the ultimate mission, like the goal, like why I'm doing this. And I feel like in many things I'm trying to find this purpose, like to find this mission that is supposed to be driving me. And that is also the basis for like the discipline, for keep things going, like to keep trying, to keep experimenting. Do you feel like there is any mission in your story, or like?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. When I started, I don't think I had that kind of clarity. So it's pretty incredible that you have it. And it's great that you can kind of capitalize that to stay focused and, driven. For me, I don't think I had that kind of clarity when I started. I am starting to start to focus a bit on that part of things. Every time I think about it, specifically in terms of music, it all comes back to kind of the human experience, at least for me. And I've had a few moments when I'm playing with different groups, and specifically, when it comes to folk, not just with my band, but with other groups as well. I've played with some Brazilian ensembles in the city in the past, and I've had some moments where I'm like, so amazed by the moment itself, the fact that, you see people that are completely foreign to the culture and they're like just connecting with it instantly, and it's making their body move. You see a smile on their face. At the same time, there's a tradition that has hundreds of years. It's hundreds of years old. So like in a way, like that's one of the stories that you're telling. Like besides, what that beat means at that very moment, or what a lyric means at that very moment, you are kind of telling a longer story of humanity. Like we've been telling stories through songs for many years. We've been expressing ourselves through chords on a guitar for many hundreds of years. With my band, for instance, like sometimes beyond the story of the lyrics of that particular song, you're telling the story of like, this is how a lot of people in Argentina were, gathering in community for a long time, and dancing and connecting with their own community through that moment. So to me, it all kind of comes back to that, to kind of, it's adding our grain of sand to this human experience, because I kind of believe like if you kind of remove that, we're devoided from that human experience, or even if you go to a museum and you see a piece that is thousands of years old, and that one piece can tell you so much about how people lived, like by that one piece of broken pottery, you see like, oh, like this is how they made their plates, because this is the material they had available, and this is what they traded, and this is how they ate, and this is, like all of that stuff just through a piece of art, really. So to me, it's kind of like, keeping that practice going. So I guess I don't think too much per se about, a specific more literal story, but I guess like the overarching story of the practice on its own. And I've had some instances where, you're playing in this bigger ensemble. Specifically, there was this one time that I was playing with this Brazilian ensemble, and suddenly you start to hear like the different instruments that make up the ensemble, and you start to hear how like they all have very distinct and different parts, but you start to hear how everything complements. Each instrument complements each other, and they all somehow fit within each other, even though they're different. And you start to hear the similarities and the differences, and how those, what do you say, play in with each other, and contribute to each other's parts. And like through that experience of music, I kind of felt like somehow, we're all kind of connected, in a way. And it was this like just so powerful and driving rhythm, when everything was together. If you isolate one instrument, it's not as powerful. If you isolate this other instrument, it's not as interesting. Then everything together, you can feel how everything just naturally fits in. And to me also that says a lot. That to me is part of one of those stories, and yeah, it's pretty incredible if people can connect with that. And I feel lucky if I can be the one who facilitates that connection. For instance, there was this one day I was playing at an alley in Kensington Market with my friends. Wasn't expecting too much. It was just kind of like almost like a bit of a random party at an alley in Kensington Market, But that one particular night, there were some exchange students from Spain, and they danced the whole night to our music. And jazz music too. We're playing jazz, specifically New Orleans and Dixieland. So to me, like, and I think it was the same night, some people were rooting for someone's solo on the clarinet. So like, I was having this really weird experience that I thought I would never experience. Like, up to that point, to me, jazz was more like there's a certain distance, and there's the artist on stage, and then you're on the crowd, and there's like, it's like this untouchable form of art. And then suddenly it was like almost like, a huge party / like a rock concert, people rooting for someone solo. And like this one student or two students came to us after our set, and they said, like, this is one of those nights that I will remember for the rest of my life. And when he said that, like, I didn't to me, it was just like another little gig in Kensington Market.
Yeah.
But for that other person, it really made a difference on their story.
Yeah.
So, in a way, you are part of their story too. And you almost have a say. So to me, that's pretty powerful and pretty incredible. It was great to see it also after the lockdowns. The first few times I would come out and play for the first time after the lockdowns, see, you know, the smile on people's faces, people coming up to us and say like how much they've missed being able to just sit and enjoy that moment, you know. So I guess, you know, in terms of the mission, that's kind of what it is. If I can be a part of that and facilitate that kind of connection and be a part of somebody else's story, you know, somehow, you know, kind of leaving my grain of sand in their own journey, even if they're not, as you said, like they're not connected to music per se. They're not musicians, they're not performers, or not even connected to, you know, the scene at all. You're still, you know, leaving something. And in a way it comes back to that, you know, connectivity that I experienced through playing music in the ensemble. You know, there's like, at some point someone described it as an invisible web, you know, that it's kind of like tethering us all. And in a way, like, you know, we're, even though we don't realize it, we're kind of tugging constantly, you know? Yeah.
It's so beautiful. It's so, like when even you were telling the story about like the Kensington Market performance, I'm getting goosebumps. That's crazy. That's so beautiful. And I am even so happy to have a chance to be part of some of like the performances that I saw myself when you were doing them in summer. And I remember, I think probably one of the most like human experience oriented one that I felt was at I forgot how it's called. It's like a park near.
Oh, the St. James Park in downtown.
The St. James Park, yeah. And I think there was also the most like crowded event that I was at, like for your show. And
me too.
Yeah. Yeah, there was like unexpectedly a lot of people, and that was so beautiful because people were just like stopping by. They didn't probably even know like what was happening, but they're like, oh wow, that sounds good. Like I would just join here and chill with my friends, or chill with my family, or chill with my dog, and some of them are part of the culture as well. And it's so beautiful to see like how people are connecting on the deeper level that they're not even able to acknowledge and like grasp consciously. It's just like somewhere there, like inside them, they just want to stay, and they don't know why. They just want to stay. And it's so beautiful. Like, and at that time there was also like the evening, summer, sunset.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah, so beautiful. And I think because I grew up in a completely different country, like my culture, I think even though cultures are in general like kind of based on similar things, still my culture is very different, like from the Argentinian culture, the Latino American culture. But since I came to Canada and I've been exposed to like the Latino American culture in a way, and working with you as well, it opened so many new interesting feelings that I wasn't experiencing before. And I'm not an artist myself, but yeah, even in me, it's like unlocking something. It's like,
it's
wow.
like, you know, it's the creativity inside and the storytelling. You know, I think that resonates naturally with everyone. And some people might be more drawn to it in the form of sounds. Other people will be more drawn to it in the form of a picture, you know, moving picture, or like a painting, or a drawing, or poetry, or a book. You know, but I do think it's a very organic thing. And even, you know, like a couple of years ago, I was doing a lot of wedding gigs very actively. And within the musicians, there's a portion of the, you know, musicians that kind of look down on them, or like, you know, it's just kind of like, oh, whatever, it's just kind of to make some money. But for me, it was also like a way of, again, like being a part of this couple's story. And, you know, like it's pretty incredible. You know, for some of them, they've been planning that one day, those 12 hours, for like the last year or two. And some of them are investing quite a lot of money into it too. And suddenly, you know, you get to walk alongside them in that one very special moment and see the smile on their faces, and how you're like kind of enhancing that moment too. And, you know, a lot of them will come to you and say like, that was the best part of my wedding. And, you know, like it's incredible to see that for that one moment that they've been planning for like, and some of them they've even been dreaming about it for years, you know, since they're kids. So to know that I was able to be a part of of their story on that day and to have contributed positively in their memories, you know? Like they will keep that moment with them forever. That's also pretty powerful to me and pretty incredible. To know that for me, with so little you can do so much. So that's, you know, one of the things that weighs a lot
Mm-hmm.
in the practice. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It is beautiful. It's beautiful. Like probably the most beautiful and the most human way of connecting to each other is through this like how can I say that, like no words way of art, like through art, but that doesn't have to have any words in it,
Yeah.
like music or like seeing the images or like seeing any art objects, like even in the art gallery, and connecting through it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's
That's true.
it's very interesting. Like it's
Yeah.
very difficult to comprehend it, especially like if you have an overthinker and a rational mind. But it's so beautiful, especially like if you open up to these experiences, you can feel how many new things it's bringing into you.
Yeah. And I do think there's also something about cycling back to what you said, how you're, you know, kind of unfamiliar with the culture and stuff. When you remove the words and the images, there's something, and this is just kind of a thought that's coming up right now. There's something to me that feels like it's a little less biased or almost completely unbiased. So, you know, like you remove any judgment that you may feel if you're interacting with someone through words or, you know, like whatever, like any kind of passive aggressiveness, like all of those emotions that you feel and connect with through the music, it's impersonal but also very human. So like it's a very interesting mix, I think. And the other thing I really connected with what you said. For the last several years I've been so drawn to folk music from different parts of the world, and I guess more organically to South American folk, because I guess I feel a little closer to it and things feel a little bit more natural to me. But also because, you know, through that you can also have a glimpse into that people's history and how they live and how they connect. And, you know, there's a lot of how an instrument sounds that tells a lot about how they lived, how they even talk or perceive sound, because how they perceive sound, that's how they build their instruments to sound.
Well, I really love this thought, and I'll try to remember this quote in my head, that the cultures are the way how they perceive the sound, they're building their instruments to sound like.
Yeah, this is just a thought. It's, you know, like I didn't do any, you know, per se.
If I would do like if I would still do the social media for, I would put it like as the headline for some posts. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah, because, you know, you think like, how is it possible that there's such a broad spectrum of sound out there, even like, you know, the Western approach and the Eastern approach to music, a Middle Eastern approach to music. You know, in the Middle East they use a lot of quarter tones, and, you know, to our ears that sounds out of tune, but for them it's, you know, how they communicate in, you know, with the music language. Yeah, even if you think about it, you know, in Chinese how there's tones, you know, and or in India, they speak their rhythms first a lot, and then they play them on the instrument. And the tabla has different tones, and they can bend the tones on the tabla too. So, you know, like you can tell that, okay, like they're actually speaking you know, what they want to play. Then they play it on the instrument, and you can almost hear the words when they're playing the tabla, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So those things are pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's also often connected to nature. Like I think even the Argentinian music, like I remember we were like doing these posts about like different songs and how it was showing the concept of the landscapes that are specifically like in Argentina, and some of the sounds, I think, especially if people are from this culture, but even if they're not, if they're hearing these specific sounds, they're getting like unconsciously, they're getting the images of these nature of this nature. Of the nature of the specific place.
It kind of completes the context,
Yeah.
That was kind of the whole idea of, okay, there's the stories, the lyrics, there's the landscapes, in where these songs and these types of music happen. There's a history behind why it came to be the way it is, and there's the sound that actually happens in that region. To me that's really incredible, and you can almost see the journey of music as well when you see the instruments. Pick whatever starting point that you want, and you start to see similarities and like something that's a little different. And it's really interesting to see like those small changes as you start to move. Like a lot of the percussion instruments that we play today come from the Middle East, for instance. Or, when you think of South American folk, everything has like kind of a very similar underlying rhythmic foundation, but all of the different styles sound completely different somehow. If you do the math, it's the same rhythm.
Yeah.
How does it sound different? Why is it a bombo legüero in Argentina and a cajon in Peru? They're like just a couple 100 kilometers away, so and like Peru also uses, but like thinking of the more like signature instruments. At the same time, there's guitar throughout all of those styles, Okay, so you start to see that too. And even like the instruments also, again, like shows you a lot of what's available around. Like, why is it goat skin on bombo legüero and not like, I don't know, snake or, whatever, why a guitar and not a mandolin or, So that to me is really incredible to see too, and how you can just, in an hour you sit through a concert and you get this full experience almost,
Yeah. Oh, wow. I feel like it's been a very, very powerful conversation and very inspiring as well. And like I'm taking some thoughts with myself to home as well, like from this conversation for sure.
Good.
Yeah.
Nice. Glad to hear that.
But I think like the biggest insight is that everyone knows that still, but it's just important to remind that we just staying curious about things, curious about how things work, and like diving straight into exploring it, like exploring this curiosity, like whatever you're curious about right away, like without trying to find any mission or purpose beforehand. Even like it's okay if you're trying still, but it's okay if you don't have that mission like in the beginning.
Yes.
Maybe it will come to you naturally like afterwards, and you will be exposed to things that you couldn't even think and imagine before you started doing it. So it is important to
also,
stay open.
Try to connect with the experience and with, perhaps the artist on a human level, even if it's explicitly as like going and saying hello after the set, or just opening up to understand that, okay, this song is coming from a human just like myself, and absorb it from that organic level too. To me that has that kind of power, of being able to just connect.
Wow, that's a good advice. That's a good advice. Like I'm going to integrate it into my life, because I think like sometimes because it might feel like for not like creative artist person, it might feel like we're humans, but we're like not the same. Like I cannot come up to this person and ask anything, because like I'm a human and they're a human as well, but they're just like a different type of human. They're just on the different level.
I mean, and like it's nowadays, we feel so, and I'm specifically saying this connection bit because I think that the way we've structured our modern lives in this part of the world, it almost unconsciously pushes us to be a little bit more disconnected from the person around us, and just to realize like, oh, there's a person next to me. There's that person that feels the same emotions as me, and this person is expressing them through this music, or has dedicated lots of years in putting together this craft so I could enjoy this moment. And just kind of like bringing down all of the gears and getting rid of all of, whatever walls that we build around ourselves of like, to me, like I almost even think about it. I go to pizza, like there's a counter and there's already like in our minds a wall, of like, that's a retail business thing sometimes even, like, oh, it's not a person, like sometimes we forget to even say hello or ask how their day is going, like. So to me, like, that opportunity to connect through the music is an opportunity to start kind of removing some of those walls and remember, like, we have people around us, and again, some of these songs and these folk styles connect us to the roots and to nature and whatever that is. Even if you're not connected to the culture, like it still kind of grounds you, or at least I find that, and removes all of that BS that we've been building for our lives,
Yeah, we're often just overcomplicating lives.
I think so sometimes, a little bit. So yeah, like I do find that music kind of helps remove a bit of that.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like it's been a very meaningful conversation, and it is such an honor to have like you as the first guest on this podcast, and in general, like I think, yes, that's just a very precious moment, and I have connected with a lot of ideas like on a deeper level as well, and I have it's just like my intention for this podcast in general is to feel more inspired. Not even like, as I said in the beginning, it's like have an action plan or something. No, it's actually just like feel more inspired, more connected with myself even, like to be able to hear like what this inner voice is telling me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah. And even like this podcast right now, it is also part of like, it's part of my creativity in a way, because it's like I feel like I need it. I think that I've been like seeing like different interviews and different podcasts as well, and I was feeling like I feel like this is something I want to do. I think I want to do this.
That's nice. That's great. And I think that's a big part of the journey, and to me it was music helped me with that, but it can take any shape, any form, like I distinctively remember times when I would sit behind the piano, I'm trying to write something, and I could remember this moment where I can feel the music. How do I translate into the sound or into the piano? And I remember that day, like I just sat behind the piano for like a good 5 minutes with my eyes closed, thinking what that feeling translated into a chord, until I found it. And then like to me, that question of like, what am I hearing? Forcing yourself to listen, and in that specific example, it, translates specifically into the creative process of music, but the practice itself of listening to yourself, to your surrounding, to that musician that's playing, to the other person that's talking to you, just truly just listening. What am I hearing? What am I feeling? And just taking that time to close your eyes and absorb that feeling. And even if it doesn't come out quite right away, or if it takes some time, it can be frustrating, but the practice of allocating some time to sit with that little thing that you have inside and trying to decipher it, in whatever shape or outlet that you'd like, it's truly just so important, I think, listening. Yeah.
And be present while listening.
Yes. There's a mindfulness behind it, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for being here on this podcast, and thank you to whoever was listening to this podcast, and I hope that it also resonated with you. This is the second episode of this podcast.
Yeah.
But like I think the first one was like the pilot episode. So this one is like the actual first episode.
Okay. Nice.
At least I want to think it this way.
Yeah.
So yes.
Okay. Well, Marina, it was a real pleasure being here. Thank you so much for thinking of me, for having me.
And thank you for listening, and have an amazing day ahead, an amazing week, because today is Monday.
Today is Monday here, right now.
Stay tuned.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marina.
Okay. Thank you.